Hey guys, welcome to your Unit 5 wrap-up, the Roaring Twenties, Boom Time in America. This is your review for your Unit 5 exam, so make sure you are paying attention and getting prepared for success. Alright, so your era summary. So the era of the 1920s is characterized or defined by international isolationism. So the United States is making the decision to stay out of other countries' issues, and we are only going to be worrying about ourselves. This is for two reasons. The first reason is we do not want a repeat of World War I. We had no business being in that war. We don't want a repeat of another world war. And then also the fear of the spread of communism. So during World War I, communism had taken over Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, and Americans are terrified of it because it goes against the American dream ideology. So this is going to create a suspicion of immigrants and lead to nativist sentiments, which we're going to get into. So this is going to cause isolationism in the United States. We want to focus on ourselves. We want to focus on economic domestic issues. So it's all about putting America first. Economically, this era is going to be fantastic. We are going to see a mass increase in production. That means American factories are making more products, and the consumer, so you and I, the shopper, are buying a lot more things. So there's a higher demand for products, and we're buying those products, and this is going to lead to an economic boom, and financially everybody's going to be doing great. This is going to eventually end with a crash of the stock market, but we're going to talk about that in Unit 6. So just put that in your back pocket for now. Socially, this era is going to be defined by drastic change for women and for African Americans. So both are going to start coming into their own, and women are going to push for more rights, and African Americans are going to have a renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, and they are going to create their new identity. And then finally, this era is going to have Prohibition, which is going to make the manufacturing, distribution, and selling of alcohol illegal, which is going to lead to organized crime. So think Al Capone. And this is going to become the most violent era in American history. So we have a lot to unpack. So let's go ahead and let's get into the specifics and get you ready for success. All right, so the amendments of the Roaring Twenties. We have the 18th Amendment, which is going to make the manufacturing, sale, and or distribution of alcohol illegal. So you cannot buy alcohol. And this is going to lead to a black market because people are still going to go buy alcohol. But instead of going to buy it in the store, they're going to go buy it from the mob. So this is going to lead to organized crime, which is going to lead to a massive increase in violence. There's going to be illegal bars, which we called speakeasies, and people are going to openly defy the 18th Amendment. But because of all the crime that's going to happen, the 18th Amendment is eventually going to be repealed, which means they're going to get rid of it with the passage of the 21st Amendment, which is going to make alcohol legal again. So easy way to remember the 21st Amendment is when you're 21, you are allowed to drink. So the 21st Amendment made alcohol legal. When you're 21, you're allowed to drink. So that's how you can remember it. All right, and then you have the 19th Amendment, which we have talked about already, and this is going to grant women the right to vote. So 19th Amendment, ladies, we get our right to vote. We get the right to voice our political opinions. All right, immigration in the 20s. So during the 20s, we're going to see a large number of immigrants coming from Eastern and Southern Europe, and they're going to be moving into major American cities, which is going to lead to overcrowded conditions. They are going to be looking for jobs in factories, and the reason this is going to be a problem is we have American soldiers returning from World War I, and they are looking for jobs in the same factories as immigrants. And this is going to cause a lot of discrimination against the immigrants. And because of this, Congress is going to pass the Immigration Act of 1924. And this is going to set a quota system. So it's going to reduce the amount of people who can immigrate into the United States from a specific area. And then it's also going to restrict immigration from Asian countries, Asian and Arab countries. So the Middle East and Asia. All right, we have social Darwinism. So this is the idea that Darwin's theory of natural selection can be applied to society and to people in society. And it's used as an excuse for why some people have more power and more privilege than others. So this idea is rooted in the desire to keep specifically racial groups divided and maintain economic and social divisions. So to keep, let's be honest, they're based in racism. So it's to keep the white community, the Caucasian community, at an economic and social advantage over the other communities. And this is going to provide the rationalization for the eugenics movement, which we're going to be talking about here in 2 more slides. All right, next we have the Scopes trial. So this occurred in 1925, and it is often referred to as the Scopes monkey trial. So a substitute teacher in Tennessee decided to teach the theory of evolution to his students. And the problem with that is that it was illegal in Tennessee at the time because it went against the Bible. So Mr. Scopes is going to be arrested. And at his trial, he is going to have Clarence Barrow as his defense attorney, and he's going to be prosecuted by William Jennings Bryan. So these are 2 of the most famous attorneys in all of American history, and they're going to be major figures in this case. Scopes is going to be found guilty. However, his conviction will be overturned 2 years later due to a small technicality. However, the thing that's going to come out of the Scopes trial is the debate is going to illustrate this growing cultural conflict in the United States. And it's going to make the divide of those who support traditional values and those who support modern values much larger. So this trial is all about this shift from having traditional values, traditional ideas, to a more modern value system. So we're looking at a massive change in social ideology, social change going on here. So going from traditional to modern. All right, now we have eugenics, which I said we were going to talk about. So social Darwinism basically justified eugenics, which is the idea of human improvement by genetic means. So this is having people with desirable traits, so people who are intelligent, people who are healthy, people who are attractive, who have these strong genetic traits. They are being encouraged to reproduce and to have children, where people who don't have these desirable traits, so people such as patients with mental illness, anybody with a physical disability, criminals, or even undesired races at the time, are pushed to not have children. So this is racism veiled as an attempt to better society. And we're going to see how eugenics can be used in terms of discrimination and persecution towards specific groups in World War II with Hitler and the Holocaust. But, you know, that's coming. All right, so race relations during this time period. So we're going to have the Great Migration. We're going to have African Americans moving from the South to the North to fill jobs in a labor shortage that occurred during World War I. And African Americans in the northern cities are still going to face discrimination and segregation, okay? It's not like they're going to the north and life is going to be like perfect. They are still going to face some issues. However, they are going to find that there are fewer barriers between them and voting. So they're going to be able to voice their political opinion more, and they're going to become influential in the election process. We also have the Harlem Renaissance going on at this time, and we're going to talk about that in more depth. But it's going to help develop this new identity for African Americans and a sense of optimism that this American dream could work for them. These social changes, though, were not accepted by a lot of people. There is going to be a lot of backlash from the white community. So we're going to see a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow laws, and an increase in the number of lynchings, unfortunately. But race relations for the African American community are going to begin to improve. All right, nativism. So this is fearing that immigrants are going to take jobs away from soldiers returning from the First World War. And this is coupled with the mass number, the influx of immigrants coming from Eastern and Southern Europe. And this is going to lead to an anti-immigrant sentiment. So this is going to help foster the idea of nativism, being afraid of immigrants and hating immigrants, discrimination against them, increased racial tensions, and the rejuvenated Ku Klux Klan, which we talked about in the last slide, is going to begin to target immigrants as well as African Americans. All right, the Red Scare. So this nativism is going to play a big role in the Red Scare. So as I talked about when we opened up this presentation, is that Americans are scared of communism. They are scared of communists coming to America and trying to take over our country. So if you combine this with our fear of immigrants, the Red Scare is going to become a much bigger deal. So fear of communism, fear of immigrants, and it's going to lead to this paranoia that the Soviet Union's trying to take over America. So a plot is going to be uncovered that a group of communist, socialist, anarchist sympathizers are going to mail bombs to prominent political leaders and businessmen. This is going to lead the U.S. Attorney General, A. Mitchell Palmer, to order raids searching for members of these organizations. And these raids are going to become known as Palmer raids. And they're meant to find leftist, anarchist agitators for deportation. So this is going to eventually lead to the deportation of hundreds of people suspected of having communist and socialist sympathies. Okay, the key there is suspected. They didn't have to be proven to have been communist. They just had to have been thought to have been communist, and then they would be kicked out of the country. So crazy time in terms of looking for if somebody is a communist and if they were going to bring communism over here and us kicking them out of the country. All right, Prohibition, which we've kind of already talked about. So again, it is the belief that alcohol is the reason for the decline in society. You can blame alcohol for society's ills, so things such as health problems, homelessness, and crime. So a movement called the Temperance Movement, which is predominantly women, are going to push to illegalize alcohol. And they're finally going to be successful with the approval of the 18th Amendment, which is going to prohibit the distribution, manufacturing, and sale of alcohol. But like we said, this is going to lead to organized crime networks. So think Al Capone and the mob. In order to meet the demand for alcohol, crime rates are going to soar. And eventually they're going to get rid of the 18th Amendment and replace it with the 21st Amendment. And this is going to be what repeals alcohol. Oops, I went too far. Okay. So the changing roles of women. So women during this time period are going to get their political rights. The 19th Amendment is going to give us our right to vote. Women are going to start entering the labor force. They're going to start practicing their political rights. Women are even going to start attending college. So these social changes are going to become embodied in the flappers. So this was young women at the time. They were usually defined by how they dress. They are going to challenge traditional ideas. So again, it's this shift from traditional to modern. They're going to cut their hair short. They're going to wear short skirts. They're going to start wearing makeup. And they're going to really push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable for women. So the changing fashion of this idea is a rejection of traditional values, and it's this acceptance of new modern way of society. So again, rejecting traditional values and ideas and accepting of more modern values and ideas. All right, our significant individuals during this time period. We have Henry Ford, who is over here on the left, and he is the founder of Ford Motors, and he is going to innovate the auto industry with the assembly line and his invention of the Model T, and then the Model A car, but primarily the Model T. And he's going to use the assembly line to quickly manufacture cars, and this is going to allow him to produce a lot more vehicles and to be able to sell them at an affordable price that the average consumer can afford. All right, we have Marcus Garvey here in the middle. He was a publisher, a journalist, and he was the Black nationalist founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. So he is going to make the argument that blacks and whites cannot live together harmoniously, and in order for the African American community to seize the equality that they so desire and so need and want, is to leave the United States and to go make their own society in Africa. And then last, we have Charles Lindbergh over here on the right, and he is going to be the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean in his plane right here behind him, called the Spirit of St. Louis. All right, the Great Migration of African Americans. So this is going to occur 1910 to 1930, and the causes of it is African Americans are looking to escape racism. They are going to leave sharecropping and tenant farming in the South because they want better economic opportunities. They want to go work in the factories in the Northeast and the Midwest. And the effects of this is going to be a large increase in the African American population in cities like Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, and New York City. So all of the cities, if you look at the map, specifically in the Midwest and in the Northeast, during this time period are all going to see an increase in their African American population. So, and we're going to talk about what was the effects of that in New York City momentarily. All right, so immigration quotas. So there's going to be concerns over immigration starting in the 1880s, but then especially during and after World War I, where we start to see an influx of immigrants coming from Europe. Again, this is going to be a threat to American jobs. So Americans don't want immigrants coming over. So in 1917, Congress is going to implement a literacy test to limit immigration. So coming over here, you had to be able to speak and write in English. However, this is not going to slow the progression of immigrants down very much. So this, combined with high unemployment, is going to push Congress to put more limits on immigration. And we're going to institute emergency quota acts in 1921. And this is going to set quota for legal immigrants to 3%. So only 3% of a specific ethnic group could come to the United States. And in 1924, this is going to be reduced to 2% and is going to ban immigration from all Asian and Arab countries. All right, so I talked about during this time period, during this era, we're going to have a massive economic boom. Our economy financially is going to be doing fantastic. So what is going to cause that? And what we're going to see is stock market investments are going to skyrocket. The problem is they're only going to be done by people buying stocks, which we're going to talk about in great detail, on margin, which is going to be called speculation. And this is going to create quick wealth for Americans. So people are getting rich very fast in the 1920s. And then you combine this with President Warren Harding's return to normalcy. And this is referring to, let's return to the way life was before World War I. And this is going to become synonymous or always tied to pro-business, laissez-faire economic policies. That means the government is hands off and businesses are allowed to just do what businesses do. He's going to increase protective tariffs on all imports from other countries, and he is going to reduce taxes across the board for every American, but specifically for the rich. All right, so let's talk about these reduced taxes. So like I said, they are lowered for all Americans, but specifically the wealthy. Taxes on luxury items such as cars are going to be eliminated. Taxes on foods and other consumer goods are going to either be lowered or completely cut out. Like today, we don't pay taxes on food today at the grocery store. That's part of the return to normalcy. Elimination of taxes for freight and transportation. This is going to lead to more money for businesses, which means they can put more money back into their businesses and they can generate more products. We talked about Henry Ford and the assembly line. This is going to increase production efficiencies and a standardization of products, which is going to allow for greater production to meet the demand of customers. And customers are going to start, or consumers are going to start buying things on installment plans. So that means they will put down, let's say, 20% of the total cost, and then they will pay the rest off in monthly payments until they have paid for it completely. So that's what's going on economically. All right, the Teapot Dome scandal. So this is over the lease of oil rights to private companies of government-owned lands in Wyoming. And this was done without a bidding process. So while that in itself is not illegal, these companies, these private companies, were making payments to government officials in return for favorable leasing terms. So basically they would give them a bribe and then their leasing terms would be a lot less than what they would have been otherwise. And that is highly, highly illegal. And this is going to really hurt President Harding's presidency and his administration. And this is going to be one of the biggest scandals in all of American history. So the Teapot Dome scandal is about private companies leasing government-owned land in Wyoming and the private businesses bribing political officials for favorable leasing terms. All right, so achieving equality and political rights. We're going to see this amongst women, African Americans, and American Indians. So they're going to use assemblies. So they're going to form organizations and hold rallies to support a movement. We're going to have the passage of the 19th Amendment, which give women their right to vote. And then in 1924, we're going to have the American Indian Citizenship Act, which is going to grant citizenship to all American Indians born in the United States. So up until this time, even if you were born in the United States, if you were born a Native American, you were not considered a citizen. So after 1924, all Native Americans born in the United States are now citizens. All right, so reflections of social change. So 1920 social change is going to be defined by a time period stemming from the Harlem Renaissance. It's going to be characterized by jazz music. Economic prosperity, so remember everybody getting rich really fast, is going to be reflected in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. The attention to issues of the African American community are going to be shown in the Harlem Renaissance, specifically through the work of Langston Hughes. And then the Art Deco movement is going to reflect the cultural modernism that characterized or defined the 1920s. The image that I used here is from The Great Gatsby, but I used it because if you look at all of the decor on the border of this image, this is Art Deco. So everything was supposed to look very elegant, very clean lines. And again, it's Art Deco reflects this shift from traditional to more modern ideas. All right, so let's talk about the Harlem Renaissance. So this was an explosion of culture for the African American community. So it's a look at African American literature, art, music, dance, social commentary, and it's all going to stem out of the Harlem neighborhood or Harlem borough in New York City. It is the rebirth of the African American culture. It is the reintroduction. We are finally able to look at the African American community not tied to slavery, but they are tied to this new identity, this optimistic identity that the American dream is going to work for them, and they are going to fight for equality. And this is going to be the birth of the civil rights movement. This is the first step towards the African American community being accepted by white America and moving towards equal status. All right, the Americanization movement. So even though we are trying to stop immigration into America, we still have immigrants coming. And as they're coming in, a lot of them are not able to speak or write in English. So states are going to start passing laws enforcing immigrants to go into programs in which they are taught how to read and write in English. And not only how to read and write in English, but how to be an American. So Americanization movement is about learning how to be an American. All right, and then you're going to have the Americanization of American Indians. So even though the American Indians were not immigrants and they, were from here, they had their own culture. They had their own way of life. However, now that they have been granted citizenship into America, that's no longer acceptable to American society. And so American Indians are going to be forced into getting rid of their culture, getting rid of their beliefs, and accepting American style of living. So if you look at these images, you can see on the left-hand side in both images, you have the native Indian cultural identity, and it has been stripped away from them on the right, and they have been Americanized. So Americanization of the American Indians was about stripping away their cultural identity and them accepting and embracing an American identity. All right, technological innovations. So this is going to be the assembly line, which we talked about. So this is going to allow factories to produce things at a much quicker and more efficient rate, which is also going to allow for longer work days and higher levels of production. And then the light bulbs are going to enable factories to remain open at night. So we're going to see the start of 24-hour factories. All right, and then finally, this is our last slide. You've almost made it. We're going to see an improved standard of living. So life for Americans is going to get better. Transportation is going to become better, so people are able to move not only themselves, but they're able to move goods much quicker and much cheaper. So we're going to be able to get goods across the country faster and cheaper than we have before. Also, we're going to get the introduction of electricity, which is going to be put into homes. So now we have electricity in our homes, and we're going to have labor-saving appliances being created. So things like the washing machine. So this is going to make life better. And I showed this image because this is a suburb. Suburbs are starting to be developed. No longer are people tied to living in the cities, but they are able to spread out. And again, this is going to increase the standard of living. So that is it for your Unit 5 wrap-up. Good luck on your test, and make sure you come to class prepared for success. All right, guys. Bye.